Good evening. 6 o'clock on Tuesday, live on IDPA's Facebook page. Give everybody a minute to jump on. Hope everyone is warmer than I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 13 below this morning. I think that's officially an indoor dry fire practice day. As you guys are watching these things, if you have questions or whatever, please post them. And also let me know if there's topics that you might want to look into a little bit deeper in the future. Tonight we're going to be talking about strong hand and weak hand only shooting techniques. So, you know, I mean, I hear at matches all the time, hey, man, I'm not looking forward to this strong hand only or this weak hand only stage or shot, or the standards are going to mess me up because of strong hand or weak hand only. And typically, if there's something in a match that you dread to see, like you don't want to see this, whatever it is, coming up in a match because you just don't think you're prepared for it, that's what you should probably be practicing the most. For a lot of people, that is strong hand only and weak hand only shooting techniques. So we're going to talk a little bit about strong hand only, weak hand only, some tips that might make this a little more easy to practice, especially dry fire, because let's face it, with ammunition being in short supply and the cost of ammunition being prohibitive from going out and getting a lot of real live fire practice in, dry fire seems to be the best option for us to maintain our shooting skill set during these times. So with that, if you've all seen me before, or even Mike Seeklander or some of the other shooters out there, you'll probably notice that I've got a CoolFire Trainer system in my Wilson Combat SIG P320. This is the gun that I'll be shooting stock service pistol this year. Outstanding firearm. And now that we got these times that ammunition is difficult to get and expensive if you do find it, the CoolFire Trainer bar allows me to dry fire practice with realism. It recoils, it resets the slide and action of my gun so that I can actually reset the trigger in practice the same way that I do in dry fire practice, the same way that I do in live fire. So for those people out there who are just doing traditional dry fire, practicing that out of the holster, strong hand only, prepping the trigger, lining up the sights, breaking a clean shot, that's great. I do recommend that you look into the CoolFire Trainer when you start practicing multiple shots, transfer into support hand, target transitions, fast follow-up shot, shot split, shot-to-shot reload, all these things that we normally use ammunition for, we can now do for a penny a shot, basically, with your CoolFire system. They make about 100 different handgun models, CoolFireTrainer.com. Go to build a system. You can look by firearms manufacturer and figure out which one of those things, which systems we make, and see if one of those work for you. If you have any questions, feel free to post them on here. One of my colleague John Sabo will be watching, and he will be helping to answer any questions about the CoolFire system along the way. All right, strong hand only techniques. All right, first off, if you covered or watched what we did in the past, we talked about draws, and one of the things about acquiring a grip in the holster was I wanted to keep the thumb flagged so that I had some place to put my support hand whenever I grip the gun. All right, I shoot strong hand with my thumb flagged. I use the 3 fingers on the grip as the primary gripping force, and I try to grip from fingertips to the inside of my knuckles. So I'm actually trying to grip with these 3 fingers in like this, not front to back. So when you're gripping a gun, and this is true whether you're going to have 2 hands on the gun or 1 hand on the gun, you want to try to grip with the pressure going from side to side. So side to side pressure on the widest part of the grip, opposed to front to back pressure on the narrowest part of the grip. And let me cover this a little bit too. Grip pressure side to side will help you maintain control during recoil without steering the sights on the gun as you're pressing the trigger. I'll demonstrate this for you so you can see what I'm talking about. if I put this gun in my dominant hand only, and I align the front sight, the rear sight, and my forearm, and I start gripping the gun with my dominant hand, you can see what happens to the muzzle as I apply pressure. Now if I grip with my thumb high so that I'm less likely to grip front to back, and I start pressing from fingertips to knuckles, you see that the muzzle movement is actually less. So I want to grip the gun the same way that I would grip it if I was building a two-hand shooting stance. Keep my thumb flagged, and I want to grip as tightly as I can from fingertips to knuckles on the other side without inducing a tremor. So firm, but not to the point to where you're actually inducing a tremor onto the gun. The next part is finger placement on the trigger. It's going to be the same whether you're shooting dominant hand only, or whether you're shooting weak hand only, or whether you're shooting freestyle. I'm going to try to get the gun close so you can see. What I'm looking for here is the pad, very center of my fingerprint, right there, to hit the very center of the trigger right here. Now here's a little fit tip for people. You should see a very small amount of light and space between your finger and the side of the gun, right there. If you see a large amount of space between your finger and the side of the gun, that grip's probably too small for you. If you see nothing between your finger and the side of the gun, that means that reach to the trigger is probably a little too long. Somewhere around a quarter to an eighth to a quarter of an inch between your finger and the side of the gun means that you're going to be able to get your trigger finger squarely onto the trigger to press that trigger straight back to the rear. Finger placement on the trigger, grip pressure on the gun, all those things are important whether you're shooting freestyle or dominant or weak hand only. But when you only have one hand on the gun, they become more important. So it's important that when you build that grip in the holster, or when you pick the gun up off of a table, you get into a solid shooting platform with a dominant hand on that gun before you fire the first shot. If you watched the episode about trigger control, you saw me discuss about prepping the trigger for a shot. All guns have a little bit of excess play and slack in that trigger before the shot breaks. Now, if you've got a really finely tuned 1911, like some of mine, that amount of movement may require nothing more than just the weight of your trigger finger to take that out and prep it. If you're shooting a more traditional striker fire gun, Glock, SIG, something else, it's going to require more take-up, more prep to reach that point in trigger control where all the movement is out and the next millimeter of trigger press actually sends that round downrange. So, learn your trigger. This is important, strong hand, weak hand, but once again, if you've only got one hand on the gun, not two, this has to be even better and even more precise to make an accurate shot versus when you have a solid two-handed shooting platform. Notice that I don't have any gap between the grip tang and my gun hand right here. You want to be as high up and as far forward on the grip of the gun as you can be when you're shooting this gun with only one hand or freestyle. It's not going to change at all. Now, I see a lot of people change their foot position for strong hand and weak hand. They like to get into a bladed position, lean forward, try to get all that weight behind the gun. I've even seen people cant the gun because they think they can get a better grip, or it's more intuitive because if you point your finger and you build a fist and you put a gun in it, it's slightly canted. And what I have learned, what works the best for me, is just to simply take the support hand out of the equation when I shoot strong hand only. So if I come up and I'm in a two-handed shooting position and I'm aiming at a target, all I got to do to shoot strong hand only is this. Notice that pretty much everything stays the same. My thumb is going to remain relaxed because I'm gripping with these three fingers. My trigger prep is going to be the same every time. It's not going to change that much. So, freestyle shooting position, strong hand shooting position. It's also important to not have to change your footwork around in an IDPA stage that requires you to go from freestyle to strong hand, because excess movement equals extra time. So if I'm going to shoot, notice that when I do that drill, 2 shots, 2 shots, transfer to strong hand, only 2 shots, 2 shots, I didn't have to reposition my body in order to do it. If you shoot an isosceles or a modified isosceles stance, it's going to keep you centered towards the target that you're trying to engage. Maintaining that shooting platform when you only have one hand on the gun is superior because you don't have to change your footwork. Even if there's a stage to where I know I'm going to shoot strong hand only, like standards, I don't get into a bladed position, because if I practice a technique, I want to be the most efficient with a technique that I can have that's going to be useful in the largest variety of scenarios. And for me, that's shooting strong hand weekend and isosceles. So, high grip, thumb flagged, index finger, your trigger finger, the center of the trigger finger pad on the center of the trigger. And if you notice, my elbow is going to stay pointed down. I want to keep my gun in a vertical orientation. When I cant the gun, now the front sight starts to recoil away from my line of sight. So when I do that, the sights move in a manner different than what I'm used to seeing when I have 2 hands on the gun. When I've got 2 hands on the gun and I'm here and the sight tracks up and down and recoil, I want to see that same thing because that's what my eyes are used to tracking. Another dose of CO2. All right, so if I keep my elbow pointed down and I get my sights directly behind my dominant eye, when I shoot, you're going to see the front sight track straight up and down the way it does when I've got 2 hands on the gun. Is the gun going to move more when you only have 1 hand on it? Yes. If you're gripping a gun properly with 2 hands, you're going to notice that the front sight moves more. If you maintain a firm grip with those 3 fingers towards the knuckle, will it fall back into alignment somewhere pretty close to the first place you aimed? Yes. Do you want to keep your body weight shifted forward, like up on the balls of your feet, so that you're going to use your body weight to help absorb some of the recoil of that gun? Yes. If you have an advantage, you want to take it. So you're going to lean forward. I'm going to keep my elbow bent the same way that I do when I'm shooting 2 hands on the gun. And when I press the trigger, the gun's going to move more. I'm going to prep the trigger in between recoil cycles. As soon as the gun goes off, I'm going to re-prep that trigger. I'm waiting for my front sight to realign. The second the front sight falls back onto the target where I want the bullet to impact, I've already got the trigger prepped. As soon as the front sight lands, I'm sending another shot. Like I said in other episodes, that your eyes are the fastest muscle on the body. That's true. Your eyes are going to be waiting for your sights to realign and for you to be able to send that next shot. So if your eyes are waiting, you want to do everything else as quickly and as efficiently as you can, including prep the trigger for the next shot. If you pin your trigger to the rear, wait for the gun to recover from recoil, reset, realign, press, you're wasting time. You can reset that trigger while you're waiting for the sights to realign from recoil, so that the instant that they realign, you can be sending that next accurate shot downrange. It's not a matter of how fast you can shoot, it's a matter of how fast you can hit. These speed bumps on the gun, right here and right here, those 2 things tell you how fast you can make your next shot. They have to realign before you can press the shot. Now, can you realign the sights and still miss if you improperly control the trigger? Yes. If you improperly grip the gun, sure. It's all combined. All these things are things that have to happen in unison. But you can take care of a lot of that by simply prepping the trigger while the gun is in recoil. Doing that and getting as much of that take up out of the trigger during recoil as you can when you've only got one hand on the gun is going to be crucial, in my opinion, to making an accurate follow-up shot, because you don't have as much control of the real estate on the side of that gun with your hands to help keep it from moving as you press the trigger. So make sure that you're getting all that pre-travel out of the trigger before every shot. Freestyle, strong hand, or weak hand, but even more so, strong hand and weak hand only. Now, weak hand, once again, I see a lot of people put this in their non-dominant hand and they want to automatically start blading their body, and they want to cant the gun to get it toward their dominant eye. So if you're right-handed and right eye dominant like I am, and you put the gun in your left hand, you notice that you may have to move your head or something else in order to get that sight picture that you're used to seeing. You're trying to get that clear focus on the front side. Well, instead of canting your head, or even worse, canting the gun, and I'll explain why this is bad. So if I put this in my non-dominant hand and I move my head so that my dominant eye can line up with the sights, I just basically threw off all my skeletal alignment to whatever target I'm trying to engage and shoot at. I want my head, my shoulders, my torso, my hips, everything square to the target, so that I can more naturally align my gun and my sights to the target that I want to shoot. So what I propose you do, instead of canting the gun where your recoil is going to go away from your line of sight, what I suggest you do is you simply take your elbow and point it down, and then put that gun directly in front of your dominant eye. All right? So when I put this gun in my weak hand, I'm going to point my elbow down, and then I'm going to move the sights to my dominant eye. Once I move my sights to my dominant eye, I don't have to readjust my shoulders. I don't have to readjust my head or what I'm looking at the target, hips, or anything else. Notice my support hand thumb is flagged. I'm still gripping from fingertips to knuckles on the other side. I'm probably a little more relaxed when I shoot, my grip a little more relaxed on my non-dominant side, which means I'm even slower recovering from recoil. Working on that. Grip strength builders, probably one of the most underutilized shooting tool for competitive shooters out there, because the better and stronger you can grip the gun without exerting more force that is fatiguing, the less the gun will move, not only in recoil, but also as you're pressing the trigger. So that's an added tip about strong hand and weak hand only, is increase your grip strength. Grip strength trainers are a huge asset to that. So everything's still square. I just line the gun up with my dominant eye. Notice I'm putting the same part, the pad, center pad of my trigger finger, right there on the center of the trigger. And if you'll notice, every time I take a shot, I'm doing the same trigger prep that I do when I got one hand only, right hand only, or strong hand only on the gun. So, the next thing is transferring the gun from your dominant hand to weak hand. Because I don't recommend changing your shooting stance, once again, freestyle shooting stance, strong hand shooting stance, weak hand shooting stance. The only thing that really changes is my arms. Nothing else really changes. What I recommend doing is to move your support hand or your dominant hand thumb out of the way, so you're still gripping from fingertips to knuckles. That gives the back of the gun the space for you to come and put your support hand in it. So when you start transferring a gun from strong hand to support hand, non-dominant hand, you want to acquire the same controlling grip, firing grip that you normally would, and then we're simply going to roll the thumb over the side of the gun and expose the grip so that you can literally place the gun in your support hand, wrap your fingers around the grip the same way you do strong hand only, Squeezing from fingertips to knuckles. Flag thumb. Right in front of your dominant eye. Alright, so freestyle. Strong hand. Transfer to weak hand. Alright. I'm going to take a moment and see if I have any questions. All right. How often do you train single hand only and for how long? With live fire, I train until I fatigue. Unless I'm having a terrible day with strong hand or weak hand only. If I just am having one of those days at the range to where I can't get it right, I don't want to reinforce bad technique. I'll switch to something else. On the flip side of that, if I'm having one of those days to where my strong hand and weak hand only is working exceptionally well, I may shoot till I run out of ammunition because I want to continue to build that positive reinforcement every time I do it correctly. Dry fire, I never dry fire a session without some strong hand and weak hand only techniques, because it aids not only in your trigger manipulation when you only have one hand on the gun, the difference in realigning your sights between two hands on the gun and only one hand on the gun, but also it just aids in the comfort of manipulating your handgun. Dry fire is the best way to gain comfort in manipulation of your firearm. If you have to think about draws, if you have to think about reloads, if you have to think about transitions, if you have to think consciously to be able to get these things done in a match, you don't have time to think about the important stuff, which is, are my sights on target when I press the trigger, and did I press the trigger smoothly, and did it not interrupt my sight alignment? When I'm shooting the stage, I'm really focused a lot on my front sight lifting off of each target for each shot. I want to call every shot onto a target off of what my front sight does. If I have to remind myself, okay, take the slack out every time you shoot, if I have to remind myself to do that, I'm not focusing and concentrating on the front sight. The human brain focuses on one thing at a time. If you're thinking about trigger control, you're not thinking about sight alignment. If you're thinking about sight alignment, you're not thinking about grip. If you're thinking about grip, you're not thinking about movement or stance or any of the other fundamentals. So you have to become comfortable and familiar with the weapons manipulation in order to ingrain it into your subconscious so that you don't have to consciously think about an act to do it. A draw, it should be a reflex. You should have drawn your gun from your holster. Doesn't cost a penny to draw your gun from your holster and to be able to find the holster. Not only the gun when you draw, but the holster whenever you go back. If you know where that holster is and that holster doesn't move around in your belt, you will be able to find the holster just like that without having to search around and look for it. Now, if you constantly wear a different holster and it's in a different place, and some people appendix carry, conceal carry, and they hip carry for competition, and sometimes they have 5 or 6 different carry holsters, okay, I get it. I don't recommend it, but I get it. But you should handle your gun every day. You should handle your gun, whether it's a concealed carry gun, whether it's a competition gun, whatever you're trying to improve the most, you should handle that every day. Now, that being said, you got to go through all the safety procedures. Remove the magazine, clear the chamber, lock the slide open, look, feel, make sure that there's no ammunition on your person. If there are other magazines that you have, if they're loaded, get them away from you. If they're not loaded, double, triple check them before you put them in your magazine pouch. But you should handle your firearm every day. The more you handle it, the more manipulate it, the more comfortable you're going to be with it. Same thing with dry fire practice, strong hand, weak hand. Do it every time you dry fire practice. Jeff says, I never made a habit of ever pinning the trigger just enough to fire around and instantly returning to a prepped position. Correct. But remember, just as a clarification, when I press this trigger, I don't control the forward movement of the trigger, listening and feel for an audible click. I actually release the trigger and then bring the slack back out of it just like this. As quickly as I can come back to it. My weapon fires around by pressing the trigger to the rear. It doesn't fire around by releasing the trigger and letting it move back forward to reset. So I don't need control going forward. I just need to get my finger out of the way and let the mechanical reset of the gun do what it's supposed to do. Now by that I'm not saying I'm going to press the trigger, take my finger all the way out of the trigger guard, come back in. I only want to make sure that I come off that trigger just enough that my finger just loses contact with the trigger, just slightly. But that's going to ensure that I'm going to reset the trigger and I'm going to be able to fire another round. How many times have you tried to practice a bill drill and you're trying to get 6 rounds fast as you can and it sounds like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Well, that's not allowing that trigger to come all the way off and reset before the next shot. So I do encourage you to learn your trigger enough to let your finger come just off of the trigger itself before you reset. How often do you train with a grip strength trainer? Honestly, not enough. It should be just like any other weight set of reps. If you do it real strong one day, you should give yourself at least 1 day break before you go back, because you got to tear those muscles down and build them back up to gain strength. I recommend a weaker grip strength trainer done many more reps, because that's how you build real strength. It is a little bit lighter weight with a lot more reps. Also, for the people that join late, what you're seeing me use here, CoolFire Trainer. This is a CO2 powered trainer barrel that drops into your live firearm. This is my Wilson Combat WCP 320. The only difference is that I've got my CO2 powered CoolFire Trainer barrel and recoil spring assembly in it. It literally just disassembles just like you would for cleaning your maintenance. Remove the factory barrel and spring, drop in CoolFire's barrel and spring. Notice it's got a fill port here in the front. That's to fill with CO2. We've got options for paintball and soda stream both that will allow you to keep CO2 for your barrel. The other great thing about this that I like to remind everybody is that there's no chamber on a CoolFire barrel. So even if somehow I messed up and I started training with ammunition in a magazine that I didn't catch, even if I inserted a load of magazine in the gun and tried to chamber around, there's no chamber for it to go into. I can't inadvertently get a live cartridge into this barrel and have a negligent discharge when I'm dry fire practicing at home. As far as safety is concerned, with getting all the realism and feel of your real firearm, plus the added benefit of felt recoil, and people ask me, well, how much felt recoil is there? It's a little bit different from system to system, and it's a little bit different due to the temperature of your CO2, but on average, somewhere between 75 and 90% of 9mm recoil for CoolFire. So if you don't grip the gun correctly, it will defeat your grip. You will have to re-grip the gun, just like if you don't grip your gun correctly when you're shooting ammunition to it. So I've actually had some customers who shoot competition who come back and say, hey man, can you tune this down a little bit, because this actually kicks more than my match loads. You know, they're loading down there to 126, 127, 128 power factor. And they say this actually kicks more than I want it to. So if you've ever experienced airsoft, it's nothing like that. The other side about this is that this is your gun. Competitive shooters are the best about adapting a firearm to their shooting style. So they may change grips, they may change sights, they may do trigger work. Anything that you do to make your gun more specifically yours and easier for you to shoot stays the same with CoolFire, because it's just a barrel and a recoil spring swap. Once it's charged with CO2, every time you press the trigger, the slide's going to cycle. You're going to experience recoil, and you're going to be able to teach yourself those things that used to require ammunition. Realigning your sights after the shot. Gripping the gun in order to control recoil better. Resetting and prepping the trigger in between shots. All of those are things that before required the use of ammunition. Jason, I believe I just answered your question about the percentage of recoil. All right, and also if you have any questions, there's a ton of information. I've got a training series on YouTube called CoolFire Trainer Academy, where we go into into more details about training with CoolFire in your firearm. Tips, things that I did the year that I used nothing but CoolFire to train for the IDPA World Championship. I actually shot less than 500 rounds of live ammunition the entire year leading up to that World Championship, and still went out there and took third in the SP Master. So that was proof to me that I could use this system as a dry fire training tool and still perform at a level in competition that I've grown to expect of myself. So, all right, strong hand only shooting techniques, guys. I hope this is something that you can use. Just to recover the points again, you want to get as high up and on far forward on the gun as you can. You want to make sure that you get the pad of your trigger finger on the center of the trigger. That way you can get a straight back 90-degree trigger press. Do not alter your body's alignment to the target just because you're shooting strong hand only. And I put that gun strong hand only out there. It's going to be directly in front of my dominant eye. I'm going to keep my thumb slightly flagged so that I don't try to incorporate it in my grip. I'm going to grip from fingertips to knuckles, and I'm going to prep that trigger really hard before every shot. Hard focus on the top center portion of your front sight every time you press the trigger. Weak hand is no different. I'm going to put the gun in my weak hand. I'm going to flag my weak hand thumb. I'm going to grip from fingertips to knuckles. All I'm simply going to do is I'm going to move that gun over to my dominant eye. I'm going to keep it vertical so the front sight rises and falls in recoil the way it does when I've got two hands on the gun. That's going to allow me to maintain better sight verification and better sight tracking in recoil. Transferring the gun from strong hand to weak hand. From your strong hand position with the thumb high, I just want you to roll your thumb off to the side, giving a place for your support hand to come in behind the gun and actually take it from your dominant hand. If you'll notice, every time I shoot with one hand on the gun, the support hand, whether it's right or left side, always comes up to my chest. This is important for two reasons. One, you're not going to wind up covering something with the muzzle of your gun if you've got it out of the way. Secondly, pendulum effect. If I leave the gun in one hand and the other arm is swinging for any reason, that pendulum effect is going to make your sights pretty hard to align. So anytime I draw, strong hand or freestyle, my support hand comes up to my chest. That way I can meet and bring it out. If I'm going to draw and transfer to weak, once it gets here, I'm simply going to roll that thumb out of the way, place it into my hand, grab it with my support hand, and then I'm going to be ready for that next shot. All right, so strong hand, weak hand, draw, transfer to support. Body doesn't change positions. My skeletal alignment remains the same. Next time you get the chance to go to the range and shoot some ammunition, which hopefully is soon. I mean, here in Tulsa, it's cold, snowy, and everything else, and I'm jonesing to get out and do some more shooting. In the meantime, I'm going to dry fire, but the next time you go out there, try these strong hand and weak hand only shooting techniques and see if you don't improve your confidence and the ability to put a bullet on target where you want to with only one hand on the gun. So thanks, everybody. I'm always looking for topics that you all want to hear about. So if you have a suggestion, hey, Eric, let me know what you do when it comes to this. I don't care what it is. Let me know. I've been shooting IDPA since, well, this will be the 22nd year I've been shooting IDPA, so there's probably a pretty good chance that I've run into exactly the same things that you're looking at. By all means, let me know. Other than that, hopefully I'll be seeing you again in another few weeks. I look forward to any comments that you have. Match directors, I'm still looking for exactly all that I'm going to shoot this year, so if you've got something neat coming up that you think I need to know about, be sure to respond here. You can hit me up on Messenger on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to find. It's just my name, Eric Fuson. And we'll talk to you guys very, very soon. Hopefully I'll have another great topic coming up here in a few weeks, and we'll see you then. Have a good evening.